if you were a cool, hip tech guy, you were building iPhone apps. And for me, learning web development, they didn't really teach web development in school, so you'd pick it up on the side. You didn't really have that like cool thing that you wanted to do, or at least not something that non-technical people could look at and sort of say, "Wow, like you made that. That's really cool. You know, I have your app in my pocket." So like fast forward a couple of years of working at startups and then eventually coming to Kik. Kik sort of went the route of building a native platform into their messenger. So we had a messenger, very, very popular. And users want to share all sorts of things other than just text messages. They want to send photos, they want to send videos, they want to send lots of things beyond that as well. And so build a native platform so any native app can integrate with a messenger, which was really cool at the time. One of the things they ran into at the time was noticing that there's a lot of friction that comes with that. Like you're on an iPhone, I'm on an Android, I send you this message from my app. So when you get the message, you open it up, and it's like, oh, actually this app's not supported on Android. It's or not on iPhone. It's Android only, or maybe it is supported, and you try to open it. You go to the App Store. Now you have to type in your password, install it, and log into this app, and go back to the messenger and open up the message again, and like finally you've got it, right? You've got the thing I was trying to send you. And that's sort of where like the web came in. That's like, well, why don't these problems exist on the desktop web? And sort of that's the problem we've been trying to solve by integrating a web browser right into Kik, because now it's like I send you content from my app, you open it, and it's just sort of there. You don't really think about it. Like on the desktop, if I send you a YouTube link, you just sort of open it, and you don't really think about it. Just you get what you want. And we're sort of trying to bring that environment to mobile. And we hope that by the end of this, that those cool kids building their iOS apps will now be like the cool kids building their mobile web apps, right? On any mobile browser. Yeah, cool. Cool. Apparently we have coffee now, so we're alive and well. Yeah, so as I was saying, this was originally built as mobile web apps messaging era, and part of that was sort of the expectation that you guys are mostly beginner to intermediate in the realms of HTML5, or at least mobile web. Is that sort of true? Head nods? Yes? No? Or some people are experts? No nods for that either? Okay, cool. And then the flip side of that was that a lot of this is going to be you guys building stuff. So either bringing in an app that you wanted to build or an idea for an app. So if you don't have one, I'd suggest start brewing some ideas in your head while I go on a bit of a rant. Yeah, so this is going to be broken down into, I'll talk a bit about, like what is mobile web, like plus messaging, like what does that mean? Then get into more ingrain of the technical aspects of it, like at Kik. From scratch, how do we build an app? How do we take it to market and then sort of distribute it amongst our users? And then sort of get into that with you guys so that you guys can build as we go. Yeah. Cool. And also, yeah, as we go, you guys can continually ask me questions and interrupt, and there'll be time later on for if you want me to go over sort of anything as you guys are building that you want to see. I'll get my code up, and we can sort of hack away and see how it goes. Yeah. All right, cool. So, yeah, let me get into why I think the mobile web is awesome. And I think there's some obvious things that come with the desktop web. Let's see if I can get this to work. Cool. Yeah. So on the desktop, there's some like really obvious things like I described earlier. I got into distribution aspects, but like the biggest thing is just developer accessibility, right? Anyone can become a web developer. You don't have to own like if you want to build an iOS app, you have to own a Mac like laptop or something, right? Like you can't build anything unless you own a Mac product. You can't see it on your phone unless you own an iPhone, right? Like there are lots of things like that prohibit developer accessibility. And additionally, like just the tooling is just so amazing on the web. Like the open source community just basically provides everything you'd need. And if it's not there, somebody's working on it, or you can go and work on it, and anyone can use it. And like that's really is a big deal, especially in terms of iterating towards like what are the best ways to build products. Then, as I alluded to before, distribution. Like everybody wants to build a product and actually have people use it. And sort of the web is built for exactly that. It's built for the idea that anyone can access your content, regardless of what browser they're using. Obviously, some browsers may not render it properly or whatever, but they're not prohibited. You don't go to Chrome and say, hey, Chrome, I'd like all of Chrome users to be able to access my website, right? That'd be crazy. You just tell people, go to this URL, and it shows up. Or better yet, you just tell somebody else to link to your content, and then you just sort of get it, right? And I sort of think that, like, once you go through all of those things, what will naturally happen is, people iterate on these sorts of products to the point that users will eventually get the best products. Users will decide what they want, and people will sort of build every incarnation of whether it be good or bad or just absolutely terrible. But at the end of the day, users get to decide, either they use it or they don't, and we'll just sort of work that way. It's not like, us as a corporation have to decide, like, no, we want to promote these types of apps. I mean, you can do that, but anyone can build a web app, and that really is the power. Obviously, that comes with a bunch of costs. On mobile, particularly, one of the biggest things people complain about is performance. Now, some of that is unwarranted, but some of that's just true as well. If you're trying to build like a Canvas game or something like that, if you're a proficient iOS developer, you could probably get better performance out of that, especially if you're doing excessive 3D graphics or anything like that. But a lot of the time, that sort of isn't true, and I hope to show that as we go along, that some of the basic things that people think about are in terms of like what is an app. Like that can totally be achieved on web, and that can be achieved today. And as devices get more powerful, and as mobile browsers, catch up to where desktop browsers are today, hopefully that'll go away as well. And then on top of that, like the cool factor, right? Nobody's making mobile web apps and being like, yeah, like there's a bit of community around it, but definitely not like I'd go to my friends and say, hey, I made a mobile web app. They probably wouldn't have any idea what I'm talking about, and that's totally fine. Consumers shouldn't really care about what technology is under the hood. And if we can get past the, oh, it's not performant, oh, it's not good enough to be an app, if we can get past all of that, then consumers won't notice. And hopefully we'll get past that as well. And I think all of this comes down to expectations. If the technology is there, if the device is there, the only things left are like building better tools for ourselves and sort of raising the expectations for everyone, like developers particularly, of like, this is what consumers expect out of apps. Well then, let's build apps like that, because we totally can. Yeah. So the thing I'm trying to get out of this is sort of get everybody to take the mobile web seriously, because like I described, right? There's this gap in terms of expectations, and what that means is there's like a whole lot of potential in that, as you raise the bar and as you start building cooler things, there's a lot of potential in terms of mixing the web on mobile. And to do that, we need better browsers. That's one of the things that Kik's working on pretty aggressively, is building a mobile browser that we think is suitable to the world of apps. Suitable to the world where users take out their phones and want to play with something very particular, right? Like what's an app? It's like the way the original iPhone was built is sort of like you can take your phone and turn it into whatever that app is, right? Originally there were a bunch of crappy apps, like you have your flashlight app and your fart apps, but that's like every platform. But the idea is that you can take your phone and just like turn it into exactly that. It fills the entire screen, and for some period of time, your phone is that. And we want to do that, and we want to do it well for web apps as well. And what I'm getting at with like the desktop is sort of like desktop was originally native apps, right? The desktop was originally all about you own a Windows machine and you have a bunch of Windows apps, or you have a Mac and you have a bunch of Mac apps, and I guess the latest version of Office isn't out yet for Mac, so you'll have to wait to get the new features. And sort of the web sort came in and just like obliterated all of that to the point that like some long-standing products like Office still exist and they're still prominent, but majority of the products people use on their desktops are going to end up being in web browsers. And sort of the way we see it is like, well, why isn't that on mobile? Right? Why can't we just bring that here and get all of the same benefits? Yeah. So from here, I mean, what I'm going to show you guys today is sort of like, this is like what needs to be done. Well, we need better tools so we can build better products, right? And I think the tools are sort of coming along. And like, if you guys have been around to any of the other sessions during this conference, like you must have seen like everybody's sort of working on this at this point. Everybody wants better tools to build better products. And people at this conference more than anyone else wants to see the web like truly succeed. And if we build better products, well then, users will like the content more, and you can retain users. You can actually compete for users. And what that ends up with is, you get more users, you get better distribution, and you can succeed as a web developer more than just building the product. Right? Yeah. So today, as I was saying before, like what I want to get through is, us at Kik, we build web apps. I'll sort of show you a couple of them, and then we'll build as we go and sort of walk through the technologies that we use to build. And you guys will build along with that. And hopefully at the end of this, you guys will walk out with apps of your own that you've built. And then also address the common issues that we run into on the web, which hopefully we've sort of covered or at least masked from users. Sorry. Yeah, what is this not? Obviously, like I was saying before, like there's some worlds in which the native apps can just outpace our web apps. And there's some things that we can't fully compete on yet, but obviously that's changing. And this is not about like making really high performant games. This is not about something like WebGL, which is not even available on most mobile phones. This is about like the incarnation of apps as users think about them, right? Yeah. And also, yeah, this is not the only way to build mobile web apps, right? There are lots of tools, and that's really why the web is great. This is how we do it, and like hopefully along the way, we'll see more and more tools out in the wild. Yeah. Yeah. So as I was saying before, right? Like what are the great parts of the web? Like we want to take that and really leverage it to make the mobile web succeed, and that is like because it's so easy for developers to interface with the web and build things for the web, just naturally they're excellent tools, and there will be better and better tools as we go. And also because distribution is so easy, and anybody can have a web browser and anybody can go to a website. It's the same reason that we can leverage this to make apps popular. We can make mobile web apps that can really reach lots of users. And again, like what I think is that what we'll get out of this is just absolutely the best products. That hopefully the native world will be like the slow world that is outpaced by iteration on products that the web will have. And as for the disadvantages, well, I think we can get the performance we need so that we get like past the minimum viable app that users will accept as good products. And hopefully mobile web will be cool, which is all awesome. Yeah, and also in the distribution line, like I guess I'll walk you through our Kik app and what it means to have like a mobile browser built into a messenger. There are a couple things that make it sort of unique, mostly around the distribution aspect, which is that like like sure, you can find websites through websites, which is normally how the web works. What we think is more powerful is finding websites through your friends, right? If I share content from a website, like I was talking about the YouTube video, if I send you the YouTube video and you open it up, you've now just effectively got the YouTube app as well on your phone. And what we find is like that's like one of the most powerful ways to get real distribution. And that's the difference between like having good growth in your app and having exponential growth in your app. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, before I actually get into building stuff, sort of like covering like the very basic like what is mobile and like why did that change so much and like why was the web sort of left behind? Is that like like varying form factors. Like you get all sorts of different devices that are just not what we were used to, right? Where everybody makes or at least back then, everybody made desktop websites, and like really that didn't work too well on mobile, right? Or at least not in the same way that we'd expect out of apps. Chromeless and full screen, right? Like that means like, users can get apps that are their phone. They can get all sorts of cool products that make them believe that like, yeah, I have this device that can do this thing. It's not like the browser that has the navigation bars and has like little URL input and all that kind of stuff. And the app you're in is not my website. The app you're in is the browser, right? It's all about the browser, the bookmarks and the reading lists and all those kinds of things. Yeah, and like the last part is the responsive interfaces, and I don't mean like responsive web design as in like when you change the size of the screen, the layout shift. What I mean is like responsive from a user's perspective, right? When I press a button, I expect there to be a down state, right? When I release the button, I expect an action to be performed immediately, right? And like things like that are just sort of taken for granted at this point. But like when you really think about it on the web, like that definitely was not an expectation ever, right? You click on a link and you get that little orange highlight around it, and then you sort of sit and wait for something to happen, and then oh yeah, you see the spinner, and then at some point like the next website flashes in, and like several elements of the page start popping in, and it's not like it was impossible to build apps that were very responsive to user interaction. It's just that it's not an expectation. And sort of like what I want to go over is like, so like part of that is like there's this mobile look and feel that apps have that are about like there's the top bar, and you have these navigation UI around it, and when you hit a button it like switches pages immediately, and I expect transitions, right? I don't expect it to be I hit a button and plops in like a whole bunch of content on the next page. And what we want to do is bring that in as well. Yeah, so like one of the questions I've got a lot is sort of like, well, why would you build a browser into your messenger? Like that seems like a weird idea. And at first glance, it sort of is. Like having a messenger on mobile just makes sense, right? Like messenger, messaging is just like a core functionality on mobile. Like I don't know if you can imagine having a phone where you couldn't message your friends. Like I don't think that's a phone that anyone would really want to use. And in fact, if you look back to like the dumb phone era, if you had a phone that couldn't make phone calls but could SMS your friends, like you might still actually want that phone back in those days. Because yeah, people want to connect with each other, and people want to chat, and they want to chat in all sorts of different contexts about all sorts of different content as well. And it's not like when you think about like the way the internet works, it's like internet is just about connecting like people to people and people to machines and machines to machines, and sort of like if we can get all of those pieces rolling, we can sort of get things interplaying with each other, like building conversations around content and distributing content through conversations, things like that. Yeah, because again, like people want to share content. That's just a basic feature. When we saw like the large rise in social products back in the 2000s, like the first thing everybody was doing was like, yeah, I want to share my YouTube video with my friends, right? I have my website. I want to have those social links where I hit the button and now it's shared to all of my Facebook friends, all of my Twitter friends, right? So yeah, we want that to be a thing on mobile that is both like frictionless and rich, right? I'm sharing something on Facebook or I'm sharing something in my conversation, and when I open it, I get this rich content. I get this experience that my friend was trying to get to me, and it's seamless, right? If it's a game, like I'm maybe sending you the turn of the game, right? And we're going back and forth in this conversation and in this game. Yeah. So the next thing I want to just sort of show is I'm just going to open up the iOS simulator and sort of like talk about what does it mean to have messaging as a part of a web app or mobile web app. So let me just, there we go. Get this open. So I've just got, I didn't want to demo off a phone just for the sake of you guys seeing my messages. So yeah, I got a Kik running on a phone right here, and there are like different ways of integrating this web app. So for us, this is the Messenger, and we have all of the websites you've sort of gone to. We have our little list of the most popular websites in here. Yeah, but really what I want to show is sort of like what are the general ways that people are integrating with the Messenger, right? So let's start with something like Reddit. Everybody loves a Reddit. This is actually one of the original apps we made on mobile. Like if this was made back in the iOS 6 days, so it looks like an iOS 6 app. If this was running on Android, it would look like an Android app. Because this web, we can just like swap out style sheets, and things are just themed as whatever platform they're on, and it's pretty easy to do that. But yeah, so I mean, from a user's perspective, this is just an app, right? Like, it does the iPhone transitions as you'd expect them to do, and it sort of works that way, and they wouldn't know the difference. Everybody loves browsing Reddit, and like more than that, I'd love to, easily share with my friends. I want to share. Well, I guess I'm sharing with myself this Reddit app. And what happens is, so the guy who didn't have the Reddit app opens this link to that piece of content that you send, and he's like, oh great, that's awesome, right? But I mean, what he also got is it just sort of installed Reddit as well as like in his browser history essentially. So yeah, so you can go in and you can start browsing around, and what we see is like that's pretty much the most powerful way to share your app at this point. We're seeing developers who are getting like 60 to 70 to even 80% of their installs coming from just like people are sharing it, right? You can get a lot of these inorganic distribution mechanisms, right? And a lot of people want to run ads or anything like that, but in terms of incentives from the user's perspective, nothing's more powerful than my friend sends this thing to me and is saying, hey, you should open this, right? And it's not a Facebook feed where like it's very impersonal. You don't know that I've seen it. It's like, no, this is in the conversation. I've read that message, right? You told me this was cool. And you might start talking about it. And if I didn't open it, I'm just sort of like ignoring you at this point, right? And so it's definitely a very, very powerful incentive. Another very similar sort of thing you'll see in something like our YouTube app. This was made in the iOS 7 days, so it is themed like an iOS 7 app. You'll notice, it's got these iOS 7 transitions. I guess I can search for stuff. Yeah, and you can watch videos. But again, like, I want to share the video with my friend, and like it's that simple. Oh, sorry. It's that simple, and like. So should he go and open the content? What he'll get is, the content that you were giving him. And he's also got the YouTube app now, which is, part of that onboarding flow through sharing content. Yeah. Another more interesting example now is sort of like veering away from just trivially sending content, and walking into more of the world of games, right? So this is Words with Friends on Kik. Let me just sort of log in. That's my internet. Yeah, so everything you're seeing right now is all in the browser, right? So this is Zynga made Words with Friends on web, and it's integrated in here. So I just logged in with my Kik identity by just hitting that. I can now let's create a game with myself. So it's going to open up a game, and I can create a word. I'm really bad at this. I'm just going to type in real. Cool. Anyway, so this is Words with Friends. I'm sure like everyone's played it at some point. But the cool part is, so I play my turn, and my friend, at this point, my friend probably doesn't even have the Words with Friends app, right? Like maybe this is release day. They've just released it. They've done some promotion around it, and I've managed to get the Words with Friends app. I'm playing it. My friend doesn't have it. So I play my turn, and Words with Friends is like, yeah, like send your turn to your friend, right? And what will happen is, my friend being me, because I'm a lonely person, I'll get it, I'll open it up, and I'll now get the Words with Friends app. It'll be my turn. I'll play it immediately, sort of sitting there through that flow. And we've got this turns of the game going through the messaging flow, which is pretty powerful. And also you'll notice is just sort of this chat icon is like, you can also have the conversation going through while we're playing the game, right? I mean, what we've seen so far is sort of the, like, I'm browsing Reddit, I'm browsing something, and I want to share content. There's the flip side of, like, I'm doing these things, and I don't want to just share the content. I want to talk to my friends while I do it, right? There's also the other side of things, which is, like, I'm in a conversation. I'm talking to my friend, and I'm like, we were talking about cats, obviously, and we're like, you know what? Like, I thought it was really funny, and I want to enrich the conversation by saying, let's embed a cat into our conversation, right? I'm like, yeah, that's the cat I want. No, right? But the idea is that, like, I'm in the midst of a conversation, and I want to enrich it with, some rich media. And now this is in there, right? So now my friend can open it up and say, oh, wow, that's a hilarious cat. And he can check out like all the other cats for all of you cat lovers. Yeah, so that's another flow. Another common flow is inviting people. So you've got an app, you've built it out, and you want users to be able to invite their friends to the app in a very simple way. I mean, we've seen so far of sending content. Sending an invite is really no different than just sending content. And so, I mean, this is our like rewards program that we have inside of Kik. And let me just log in. But again, one of the easiest things is like, yeah, you can invite your friend. So you just hit the send, hit that and invite your friend. Now in this app, we incentivize users to invite their friends, right? We're saying, oh, we'll give you more imaginary points for inviting your friends. But this is a very powerful mechanism, right? For example, there are some photo sharing apps on Kik that are like, okay, so you made these photo galleries, right? And the whole point of making the photo gallery was that I could share it with my friends. So I add my friends to the photo gallery, and they don't have the app yet. Well, I need a way for them to get the app. And there are also ways of doing that. Like I've showed before, where like maybe you can just send the photos. Maybe you can send an invite, right? Yeah, so that's, yeah, so this kind of like frictionless sharing is really, as I was saying before, is really the difference between like, I have a bunch of people using my app and they're retained and like they're telling their friends and they're getting their friends to use it, which really gets the growth of your app to a nice place. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, the last part is sort of like about distribution, right? Like I was saying before, like that's really what the web's good at, and that's really what we're trying to leverage here, and all of the like social aspects that I've showed in terms of sharing content, in terms of chatting in the context of your app, and having your app in the context of a chat as well. So those are all the messaging flows. On top of that, we have the search built into our app, just like any other browser. And we have what's called our top sites, which is more like our old school Yahoo directory type thing, which I can just sort of show. So yeah, so I'm looking for words with friends, and it's that easy for something like that to get discovered. We just have a search engine that goes around searching for these apps, and we're like, we just, like any other search engine, we automatically insert things into our search index so users can find them. Obviously, like search engines, we respect robots and all that kind of stuff, so that if you don't want to be found, you won't be found. Additionally, like I was saying, we have our top sites, which is kind of like our Yahoo, which is literally lists things based on popularity. People like to image search. People like to do this. And there is the news section, which is the most popular apps are here. But like if you're a brand new app, how do you get discovered, right? Or how do you get those first users, or what's your incentive for building this so that you can get that initial base who will share it, and then hopefully you get the chance to succeed from that point onward. And that's what this news section's for. It's like when you build something new, you go in here. Think of it as like Reddit's news section, which is like the core users who are sort of curating the world and finding the right things. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so why don't we take a quick break just before I get into actually building stuff. So I've done my rant, and pretty soon we'll just start building apps. Is that cool? So it'll take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Yeah, so I mean, like this slide says, like one of the most basic premises that we sort of walk into when building our apps is that there should be static apps. What we find is sort of like, just because of necessities of things like, we want all of our apps to be offline capable, just because people's internet connections suck, Like I was going before, like there are certain types of expectations that users have on mobile, and we like mobile web apps to sort of meet those expectations as well. And part of that is like, even if I don't have an internet connection and I open this app, I expect it to work to some degree. Maybe if it's the Reddit app, it can't fetch. Why don't I just show this? Like I was showing the Reddit app. I'm gonna, like, at the risk of ruining this entire thing, I'm gonna kill my internet connection. But I opened the Reddit app, and maybe it's like you can't fetch any content because obviously you don't have internet connection. But it doesn't show you like the browser. You don't have a network screen, right? The app handles that. The app says, it'll show you what it can show you, and it'll do its best to work. And maybe there are some apps that don't require an internet connection for a majority of its functionality, and all of that will work, except for the things that require it, right? So for example, if you have a sketching app, you can allow people to use the canvas and draw stuff, and the second they need to upload their content, it'll be like, no, sorry, you need a network connection to do that. But definitely you don't say nothing works because you don't have internet. So part of what I'm getting at, part of what I was getting at was that just because we have this necessity of offline, what we really want is static apps. What we really want is a way to ship like an entire self-contained app to a user and have that on their device, and like other web apps, it's just like auto-updating all the time. Basically, every time the user visits, it updates. And the way we do that is with the HTML5 app cache, which allows you to do that. I'll get into that later. You get all sorts of benefits out of it, where like shipping the app is way faster. It's completely static. We can dump it on a CDN. You can put Cloudflare in front of it, or CloudFront, or whatever your flavor of CDN is, and you can get it to be really fast to load, which is, again, key, right? So offline means that every subsequent load that they go to your app is fast because it's already stored on their device. Well, if it's static and you can put a CDN in front of it, then what you're also saying is that that first load is really fast because it's probably on an edge server somewhere that's close to them, and it's static. They can load fast. The server doesn't have to do anything other than literally ship those files to the phone. And APIs. So the way we build our apps is, we have this static app. It doesn't mean the content is static, like you saw with the YouTube app. The YouTube app doesn't ship with like any. I meant the Reddit app. The Reddit app doesn't ship with any Reddit content in it. It ships with the ability to render Reddit content, and that's what's important, right? You're building an app that can render Reddit content, and then for anything outside of that scope, it's like making API calls saying, hey, Reddit, give me the top posts today, right? Or if you switch your subreddit, it's saying, give me the post from this subreddit. And all of that functionality comes through the static code, but all the data comes to the APIs. And we have, in all of our apps, we just have APIs for like everything we need, right? You made a sketching app, you need to upload your photos. Well, we have an API that's like, okay, give it your photo, it'll give you back a URL where the photo's hosted, right? Something as simple as that. Or the image search app I showed you, right? It's like, give me a query and I'll give you back, JSON data about images. And so every app that we're going to make is sort of going to live true to this. Some of you guys may not get too deep into the server-side stuff of like building out your APIs. But I imagine that's the most conventional part of all of this stuff, right? In terms of what's transferable from like all the other sides of web development, like on the desktop or anywhere else, like having APIs to do all the things you need is like the most obvious and existing one. All of the stuff surrounding, how do I build my mobile UI? That's going to be more specific to the mobile web. Anyway, so you guys can sort of punch that into your computers right now. It's a bland, empty page, but it's got a bunch of links that we're going to be diving into in a second. So let me just sort of give you a run through of some of the things we're going to be using today. So this is the mobile framework we use for building all our apps. It's called app.js because we're not creative at naming things. And so unfortunately for Windows Phone people, it supports Android 2.2 and up and iOS 4.3 and up. So that's like majority of the smartphone market. And like really the goals of app.js are to make something that's very easy to create high-quality mobile web apps, or at least the starting point for building your high-quality mobile web app. Sort of structure your code in like a semi-logical way, but still giving you the ability to integrate with all of the other libraries that you might want to plug into, right? Like if you're really keen on using, I don't know, Angular or something like that, like you could just plug that in as well. But the things app.js really cares about are things like, how do I navigate between pages? What do the transitions look like? Like I was showing you the demos of the YouTube app and the image search app. I guess we've only been looking at iPhones so far, but the idea is that they look like the platform they're on. The logical transition between pages is sort of what you'd expect. So here, let me just play with the demo a little bit, right? So I can click through pages, and yeah, it's doing the iOS 7 transition that you'd expect, and if I switch to Android, it looks a bit different. It's doing the Android transitions. I think Chrome has a bug where sometimes the transitions don't come through, like that. But on the phones, it's just fine. I'm not quite sure, but I don't think Meteor is particularly specific about like these kinds of transitions, right? Yeah. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not huge on Meteor. Yeah, so I mean, this is just sort of like the base kit of app.js. It comes with like, playing with different colors, all that kind of stuff. But majority is just like, again, like all of the UI elements that you might see that come with it are sort of peripheral to the idea that like this is really about like building logical pages and navigating between them. And that's really the value add that's going to come out of this. So yeah, we'll get into the docs and all that kind of stuff later on, but so just a quick introduction. This is going to be sitting in the background as we work on this stuff. Observer is just, well, it's a web server. And it's just going to make it easier as we develop. We're probably not going to play with it too much. It's going to be sitting in the background, serving our content, and doing nice, nifty things like updating our HTML5 app cache for us and automatically reloading your server as you edit content so that the browser has the latest stuff that you're working on. Yeah, so don't worry about it too much, but it's in the links if you guys really want to dig deep and poke around. So yeah, so hope everybody went to the URL at this point. What you guys are going to need to get started on this, we're going to start coding. So you guys are going to need to make sure that you have Git and Node.js installed on your machines. I'm going to assume most people probably have Git installed. The links to both of them are in the are on here. It should be as simple as just clicking on the link and clicking the install buttons for all of those. So I'll just give you guys a bit of time. Is there anyone who doesn't have Node or Git on their machine? Cool. I'll give you a second. Yeah, for the sake of everybody else, I'm going to be building an app as well as we go. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, if you guys want to get ahead, you can open up this starter kit repo. That's in the list, and all you want to do is just clone the repo on your machine. So it'll open up a GitHub repository, which you can just grab the URL and clone. Yeah, just like that. Oh, I also didn't mention this earlier. From our team, we actually have Nick sitting in the back. Yeah, he's been involved. Yeah, so if you guys need any help at any time, he'll wander over and help you guys out. He's been involved in like sort of all of the different technology aspects at Kik, so he knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, the premise of the starter kit is that you should just you should be able to clone it, like do npm install and npm start, and like you're up and running basically. You have an app that you'll be able to open in Chrome or on your phone, and really it'll be an app, and now it's up to you to turn it into the specific product that you want to build. But it should be a good starting point. And hopefully everybody's got an IDE that they're comfortable coding with. Yeah? Yeah, if not, just grab Sublime Text or whatever your hip choice of IDE is. Yeah, and for developing mobile web apps, in general, you can use any browser that runs WebKit. So like all Android and iPhone devices are like their web browsers are WebKit based. So in an ideal world, we'd be able to use Firefox just fine, but browsers aren't as compliant as we'd like them to be just yet. Although it is getting pretty good. I suspect by like late this year, we'll be able to build everything in Firefox just fine. So that means like Safari, Chrome, Opera. Safari doesn't exactly have the greatest emulation mode for mobile. So I'd suggest just go for Chrome or Opera. If you're really keen on Opera, that's cool. Are you good? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, once we get into the Chrome API, the Kik APIs, we have a Chrome extension that simulates a lot of the APIs, or I think all of them, in the browser. So you can actually get all of your development done in the browser, run it on the phone, and everything should just sort of work out of the box at that point. Again, that's a Chrome extension. If you are really keen on Opera, there's a Chrome extension compatibility mode that you can install into Opera, and it'll let you install the extension there as well, and it works just fine. It's that, basically, yeah. So if you see a directory that has something that says web and package.json, you're good. All right, I'm just going to dive in at this point. Yeah, so I mean, once you've got your starter kit, like I've done the same on my end. I've created a repo. I'm going to build an image search app because that's going to be cool. All I've done is clone the repo. I got in there and I npm installed. Oh, I guess I didn't npm install before. And barring issues with your network connection, everything should be good after that point, where you can just sort of run your app. So you just do npm start to run your app, and I already have a server running on that port. There we go. So you just do npm start to run your app. Do I have another server? Oh god, I have. Okay, I'm running too many servers. Okay, great. So npm start runs your app. Like it says, running on port 5000. So you just go to your browser to localhost 5000, and you see something that looks very out of place. So what we're going to get into is Chrome has excellent support for emulating mobile phones, and like it has this convenient thing where you just have just drop down of like all sorts of different devices, and you just pick the one you want, hit emulate, and you're pretty much good to go. So if you just like right click your page, inspect element, it opens up the inspector. Normally the inspector actually starts out like that. Because mobile phones are normally in portrait rectangular this way, I'd suggest sticking it onto the side. And at the bottom here, there's this thing that says emulation, right? And what I can do is just hit emulate an iPhone 5. I refresh the page, and it's now pretending to be an iPhone 5. I could say emulate a Nexus 5, refresh the page, and now it's pretending to be a Nexus. It's doing the Android transitions, and we're sort of good to go in terms of iterating on our app. All right, does everybody have that sort of set up? Nods, shakes, no nods. Well, people are staring intently at their screen, so I'll give you a second. npm start, yeah. So yeah, npm is the Node package manager. It comes with Node. It's basically in this package.json, this file that came in there. Basically, we're telling Node like which libraries that our code depends on. And so what I've included is Server, like I described before. It's our web server that's going to run our code. I've also slightly included this Kik lib. It's just like a helper library that we've built for people building Node apps that handles the Kik APIs that you guys will see when we get ahead of her. Right? Now, yeah. So just to reiterate what I said when we started, everybody has an idea for an app that they want to build, right? And we're gonna build something specific each. Yeah. Because when we walk out, if you guys haven't built an app, then I've failed. And I don't like failing. All right, cool. I'll just get into this now. So you guys clone the starter kit. What you notice right away is like this is the file system. We've got a proc file, README, all that stuff. I tend to, whenever I'm making small apps that I'm just iterating on, I tend to host it on Heroku. Heroku is just a convenient hosting service. We're building static apps, so in reality, you can host wherever you want, right? Literally every hosting service will support static content. You could dump this on S3, or you can dump this on anywhere. Heroku is really convenient, just because of how easy it is to get set up and how easy it is to deploy. It's just like git push Heroku, and then it just sort of goes. So yeah, so profile, if you just read what it says, all it says is run our app in production mode. It's just telling Heroku when it gets our app, run it in production mode. Package.json, like I said here, it's just dumping in our dependencies. We're going to use Server as our web server, and eventually we're going to get down into how to use the Kik library, just sort of to help you with some stuff on the server if you need it. But all of the interesting stuff is in our web directory. And it's pretty standard format that you'd see in lots of things. People have, the JavaScript directory, CSS directory, images directory, and then sort of go from there. What's most interesting we're going to see is in our index.html file that comes with this. What I've done is included a whole bunch of things. So metadata, obviously title, we can sort of skip past that. Icons, when we're running inside Kik or like really any browser, you're going to care about the icon that shows up associated with your app. Like if you saw the history in the sidebar inside of Kik, well, like this is the title we use, right? It's the regular document title. Description. Very important is the viewport tag. I know there's actually a guy who's doing a full session on just the viewport tag. I'm not sure if that was yesterday or what, but he's doing a 7-hour session on this viewport tag. So I'll just tell you how important that is. But for now, I guess just trust me. This is what we use. The viewport tag basically tells the browser like how it should lay out the phone. Like if you notice some websites if you have a phone, some websites allow you to pinch to zoom and some don't, right? Well, there's a thing in here that says like, do I want the user to be able to scale the page, yes or no? Or what's the maximum scale they should be allowed to? The viewport I've put in here basically says, don't let them do anything. Like lay it out the way it's supposed to be, and then don't let the user do anything. If they want to pinch to zoom, that means they're interacting with some piece of content or some element on your page, and we'll let that handle the pinch to zoom. Because again, like we're trying to make these feel like apps, right? And users sort of expect that when the page the entire page pinches to zoom, then I'm no longer in this web app. I'm in Safari, or I'm in the browser, and the browser's fiddling with your page, right? Minimal UI right here, all that says is it's telling the new iOS 7.1 minimal UI. So when you load up your app, like it sounds, iOS removes the navigation bar at the bottom and sort of makes it nice and slim at the top, just showing the URL. Now, in here, I've included the app.js CSS file, the app.js JavaScript file. I mean, that's pretty much all you need to get up and running with app.js. It gives you the base styles that I showed before. If you notice, like, I have a bunch of CSS files. If I open them up, they're empty. If I open the other up, they're empty. This is just in terms of file structure. I'm saying this is how I'm going to structure my files. But in reality, all of the basic stuff that you saw just sort of comes pre-built. For app.js has a concept of pages. Like I was showing you before, navigating between pages is important, right? When a user presses a button and it goes to that other page, right? Like we were in YouTube and we were looking at the search results. It shows you a list of videos. So when I tap on a video, I expect it to go to the video page, right? That's the place I go to watch the video, look at the comments, or the button to see related videos would be there, things like that, right? If I want to share it, there'll be the share button there. But the idea is that there's this idea of a video page, which could be really any video. And so app.js structures it like that. You sort of define each page that you want to use, and then we sort of go from there. We say, I'm the YouTube app. Well, I have the home page, so let's define a home page. And it's got 3 lists of like the most popular videos, the videos that are trending currently, and like the ones you've recently watched. Right? Then it's got a search page. OK, so then we go and define a search page. It's like, OK, we have to put a search input at the top, and eventually we'll automatically render in some search results, right? And so yeah, as you guys start to think about like what are you building, well, like what kind of pages will you need? Think about like if you were to wireframe your app, like what would it look like, right? You're probably thinking about like, oh, well, this is where the users land, or like, are there multiple places users can come in from? Where do they go? All of these sections of your wireframe are effectively just pages. And think about how you're going to put that into your HTML and where you're going to go from that. So for each logical page, what we do is we have a CSS file dedicated to just that. Just to structure our code in sort of a sane way. The easiest thing is just like, OK, we'll have a CSS file that's dedicated to the CSS for the home page. There might be styles that are like, well, overarching, or we might have some piece of UI that's on lots of different pages, right? So I don't know, a good example of that is probably, so yeah, the Reddit app, right? The Reddit app has like the main feed that shows you this is what's trending on Reddit right now. Then you can also go to a subreddit. Now, like it's logically different, but in terms of UI, like they're the same thing, right? You just render a list of posts and stick a title on top. It could have been implemented as a single page that gets like templated in different ways, or they could just have this like idea of like this is a list of posts, and maybe we have a CSS file that's like, this is a CSS related to lists of posts. But in general, it's also still useful to have like per page CSS files. And in the same way, we have per page JavaScript files. Because for all of our pages, we're going to have controllers. App.js sort of plays into like the MVC model, where like in HTML, we're going to have like roughly these are the elements on my page. In CSS, we're going to have this is what it looks like. In JavaScript, we're going to have like this is what happens, right? If there's a button on the page, what happened when they clicked it? What are the events associated with this page? Like how do I manage all of the things that are happening on this page and this instance of a page, right? Because what's going to happen is that when this actually runs, what app.js does is like yanks all of this out of the page and says, this is basically the class of the page, right? And what you could do is generate an instance of that class, as in if I want to load, say, page 2, it'll like create a new page 2, right? Create a controller for it, and then like shoot it out in front of the user. And you can have multiple page 2s. I can say load page 2 and then load page 2 again. And it would load page 2, and then on top of that slide a different page 2. And that's what I mean by like sort of like instantiating versions of this page. Yeah, so we've also included the Kik.js file right here. What that does is just gives you access to all the Kik APIs, so that when you run inside Kik, yeah, you can share content with your friends, and you can access the user's identity. You can get push notifications and all those sorts of things. Zepto is a sort of jQuery-ish alternative. It's, in terms of syntax, it's fairly similar to jQuery. It's very convenient. The key factor, though, is that when served with your app, it's about 3 times smaller than jQuery, which is very important on mobile, obviously, where we're looking to minimize the size of just about everything so that we can get good load times and users don't sit there waiting. Like I'm sure, like you know what, like native apps have these problems as well. Like you go to the app store, you find this awesome game. It turns out it's 50 megabytes, and you hit download, and you're sort of sitting there waiting. What we'd love is what it's like on the web, which is like I click on a link, I get there. It doesn't matter if I've never been there before. Like we have an expectation of what a reasonable amount of time is for it to load. And on mobile, it's even more sensitive, just because well, people have bad internet connections on their phone in comparison to their machines. All right. Cool. Yeah, so yeah, every time we create a page, an idea of a page like this, like we just create a new JavaScript file and a new CSS file, I guess you guys can start thinking about this now. The app I'm going to build is image search as we go. What it's going to do is allow users to search for images, show them in a list, and then send them to their friends. And then also, when they open the images, they can sort of go through an image gallery and like pinch to zoom and have sort of native features that people sort of expect out of how they process images on their phones. So yeah, so let me just delete this page entirely to begin. I don't want this. So yeah, I don't want it to be red, I want it to be green. So app.js comes with different sort of UI elements. The most basic ones are the top bar and the content. The only sort of required element is just sort of have the element that has the app page in it. That's the only required thing. Everything else is for convenience. So for example, I have home page written there. Yep.
Before you go on, I just wanted to confirm that everybody was able to install.
Oh, right. That's good. Is everybody up and running? Is anyone not up and running? I should phrase it that way from now on.
There are issues with Windows machines.
There are?
Like, NPM is not added to
Oh, right, that could slow you down. Okay. Okay, is anyone having problems running NPM, getting anything up and running, getting it running in Chrome? Okay.
So I just wanted to just ask, I mean, before we start with the
Go for it.
whole op mean, CSS,
Yep.
like versus like jQuery and mobile, CSS is like kind of like a similar library that you guys are building, like Kik.js and all. I mean, because it looks very similar. You define a DOM structure and then you just basically have the JavaScript file.
Yep, no, okay. So when we first started building this, it was like, I don't know, 2012 maybe, something like that. We actually started by saying, like we want to build this mobile web browser, and we're like, okay, so what do we want to use? Well, we want these native features. Maybe we should use PhoneGap, or we want, native-like UI, something people expect out of mobile. Maybe we should use jQuery mobile. So we actually dived into jQuery mobile, and at least back then, it became very abundantly clear that jQuery mobile's goals are very different than ours. Like in terms of the polish and the expectations that we have, in terms of like transitions or things like load times, things like that, jQuery mobile just like wasn't in the same place. Their goals, at least back then, I'm not sure now, were to like support every array of devices. So if you looked at their compatibility list, they're like, oh, we support everything almost, right? Every phone that you've never heard of. What that means is that they're also, they have to support those devices. So they have like this low bar that everything has to work on. And while you can sort of like progressively enhance things, there's only so far you can go before your code gets really complicated and like, well, I have this hack to support these devices and I have this to support those devices. We sort of jumped right past that and said, we're only going to support Android 2.2 and above, and we're only going to support iOS 4 and above, and like hopefully even drop iOS 4 in the near future now that it's like basically dead. And yeah, so our goals were a bit different, right? We're hoping to like get to the polish that we really want. And so yeah, yes, jQuery mobile is in a similar vein, but I think they address a different need in the market.
Possible to just use the Kik APIs without using this?
Definitely. Definitely, yeah. So everything's sort of decoupled, right? You can use Server for entirely unrelated things. You can use app.js for things that run in any mobile web browser. You can use Kik to make any website run inside of Kik, right? You get the Kik APIs running inside of Kik.
Kik.js is separate.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So all of these things are separate things. Yeah, if you don't want your thing to work with Kik APIs, well, then just remove the script. Or if you have your own blend of
So it's not really
mobile framework.
It's not really a framework. It's more
Oh, no.
libraries.
Yeah, so Kik is not a framework whatsoever, right? So Kik is like, well, you want the send API. Well, we have an API that's kik.send, right? And so this library is all about giving you access to that functionality. App.js, on the other hand, is the framework. App.js is the, navigation, all the stuff that I described around that. That's a little more particular about what it expects, right? So yeah, this is just how we build things. Again, if you wanted to build something that just uses the Kik APIs, you could skip past all of this, dump the Kik.js file into your app, and go off and running. But we honestly believe that there are only a handful of frameworks out there right now that provide good polish for building mobile web apps. For us, obviously, we use this for everything. We've taken a look at Famous's recent stuff, and that's pretty cool too. Yeah, the only downside with Famous was the inability to test your code. It's near impossible to write UI tests for their stuff. But that's coming along, and so that's really, really exciting.
Have you tried their scroll?
Scroll? Yeah, they're bugs. But again, they're pretty new, right? So they've been working on it for a year and a half, but it's really exciting to see people really, really focused on tooling. Because again, with good tools, good frameworks, and good libraries, we can build really cool things really quickly, and that's our goal. All right, so let me get back into this. Yeah, so you're building an app. You're thinking about your wireframes, and now I'm going to say, I need a bunch of pages, right? And so every page has a top bar, a title, and sort of a content area. So if I just open up my Reddit app, basically the top bar is the whole blue section, the title is the thing that says front page, and the content area is everything below that. And the way app.js works is just sort of saying that, okay, well, anything in the content is roughly scrollable, right? That's sort of how people use it. The top bar will have this kind of stuff. You can put your buttons in there and any other navigation item in there to open up things like that. If I just go into, I don't know what a good example is. Memes, maybe. So this app is made for creating memes with your friends. Or well, you can make memes of your friends as well by just adding photos and things like that. But again, the idea is that all of these guys have a top bar. All of these guys have a title. All of these guys have a content area that's scrollable or has stuff in it. And so we're using that as the basis for all of our pages. And you can sort of skip that. You can say, okay, well, my page doesn't have a top bar because some reason. And then you can just build your app in that sort of way. That's disregarding that. But when you do it, what you get is these sort of transitions, right? We deal with the things that feel native on the phone for you automatically, right? So, if we were going back to our, if we're going back to our demo. So this is the demo app I was showing you. So this is on the app.js website. This is just sort of sitting there in that iframe. It's literally the same thing, and all it is just sort of running through the basic features of app.js. The most basic of which is it renders a page that looks like a mobile app, right? You get these transitions for free. On iPhone, you can also get these swipe gestures, which people love. Yeah. Anyway, so let me just sit down. So yeah, so for you guys like me, I'm building this app. It's going to be image search, so I'm going to, change the name to image search, make it green.
So should we just follow along, right?
Yeah. So like this is the part where you guys should be hacking away. I'm going to go through this. Increase the font size, sure. Well, is that good? A little more? Yeah. All right, cool. Yes, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to go through a bunch of UI components, things like that. Sort of get into like the JavaScript aspects of like how we do navigation, things like that. And then do a run of the Kik specific APIs. The whole time, I hope you guys are hacking away. And then once I get to the end of that, like we'll have just time for you guys to hack on building your apps, and Nick and I will be coming around and helping you guys out for any questions you have. If you guys have anything of like, I'm trying to build this thing, and it'd be cool to see a code example of that, I can come up and build whatever you want me to build. Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, so I'm building this image search app. I'm just going to load it in the simulator for now. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to load it in Chrome to show you how Chrome works. So yeah, if you noticed, I didn't actually refresh it. I came back and it was already green. It said image search. That's the server working under the hood for us. So I can rename it to image search 2. And if you just look at the logs right here, what you see in a second is suddenly network fetches are coming in. That's because the browser automatically refreshed and automatically showed me, the latest version of the code I'm working on, which is a nice addition. Yeah, so we have this content area. I have an image search app. Presumably I'm going to have, a search bar. So I'm just going to write in what elements I need. I need a search bar, and I'm going to need search results. And inside each search result, I have a single search result, and I can print them out, right? This is the most basic thing. So in app.js, if I go to the app.js docs right now, if you get into here, we have a full rundown of all the different UI components, right? So like I'm showing here, like this is how I build apps. I basically just sort of logically think about like what are the elements. I just write them out. Then I go ahead and say, okay, well, let's just make these HTML elements, right? Obviously. And then if there are any that I get for free, that'd be really convenient, right? So for example, I'm looking for a search input. Well, if I go to the input section, it turns out I can just sort of grab this search input from right here.
So where are you looking at? Localhost 4000 and you're running this on?
Oh, right, sorry. I was not sure how good the network connection was going to be, so I'm actually running the app.js docs locally. This is sitting at, so if you go into the links right in here, this is just app.js website. And then you can click on Get Started or Docs, and it's all sort of sitting in here. And I mean, this is all the same stuff I went through, right? I explained the viewport and I explained, adding this stuff in here. Again, app.js works in the mobile browsers I described, which is Android 2 and above and iOS 4 and above. So it's not Kik specific. So if you see it on here, like this is sort of like the app.js version of the starter kit. And so yeah, I explained all of this stuff. I explained how the pages work. You know what? It might be better for me to just run through this for you guys. So I described how pages work, right? I described how you instantiate these pages. The app.js JavaScript part now, you can just call app.load, tell it what page you want to load, and it will just load it, right? So for example, let me go back to my app. So for example, this is my app that I was making. It only actually has one page, right? But in the JavaScript, I could do app.load home, because it's a home page, and it'll load another home page. Now, that's a terrible idea, given that I don't have a back button or anything like that. So, but the idea is that, like, yeah, you just pick the name of the page, you call load, and it'll load it up. If there are, for some reason, you're rapidly calling a bunch of loads or something, it'll queue them up and do the transitions properly as it goes.
And it's based on a data page attribute, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to have, so app page is just saying that this is a page. The data page is saying this is the name of the page. The reason it has to be a class is just sort of that we can have efficient CSS selectors for it to style it properly and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so again, we went through, top bar. Every page is likely going to have a top bar and a content area, and we're going to dump most of our stuff in the content area. The top bar is likely just going to have a title and perhaps some buttons. So yeah, you can load your page. Why don't we just do this in the other order then? So yeah, it's talking about controllers, right? So you have your page, you have a bunch of stuff on it, right? You might have a search input, which I do, right? Well, something's got to bind to the search input and say, like, well, when the user types stuff, well, search for stuff, right? So the app.js controllers are structured like this. You just basically have a function that says, take a page and set it up, right? So take a page and find the button on it and then make it do stuff, right? So in my case, I've got this. Well, I want a search input, so I'm going to say I want an input. It's a search input, and I'm going to give it a placeholder that says search for images. So if I go back to my code, I've now got a search input bar. I'll get into the UI conveniences later, but again, this is just an input on a page. And the idea is that in my home.js file, where my controller lives, this is where I would go and say, well, when we're creating this page, we'll find the search input and then say whenever the user searches for stuff, well then input stuff, right? So I would say page find, well, let me give this a name. So search input. So I say find the search input, and then on search. So there's actually an HTML5 event for searching that makes it very convenient. So I say on search, well then, this is the query. And let's just console.log it for now. And so all this does right now is when I'm typing for stuff, when I'm typing for stuff, it should have theoretically searched for it. So page find search input on search. Not sure why this didn't work.
You go to your HTML?
My HTML?
Yeah.
Did I incorrectly name it? No, it looks fine. Yeah. Anyways, there is an HTML5 search event. Basically, the benefits of that versus using something like keypress is that key presses and key up down, like all of that is very, very fine grained in terms of events. And what you really care about is like did the user try to search something, right? And so yeah, so you get this thing with search. The other benefit is that you can tell it to be sort of real-time-ish. So it waits until the user roughly stops typing and then immediately searches for something. So if they type in a couple of letters, pause, it'll do a search. And then you can type some more, it'll do it again, which is like exactly what you want out of search input, rather than manually saying like on key press, on key up, all that kind of stuff. Especially with the weird things with key events, like what if they pasted some text in? Well, then you missed it, right? It wasn't a key event. Because on phones, you tap to input stuff. It's not like Command V or something, right?
Have you initialized the Kik class?
The Kik class?
Yeah, it's a Kik object that Kik.send returns undefined. So how do you actually...
Kik.send return. Oh, what was a... Sorry, or Kik.send. Are you jumping ahead to sending it?
Everyone has their own way of doing UI, I assume, so...
Okay.
The special stuff here is all about Kik.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, I definitely think the way you build UI is very important, and for the most part, you're probably going to build your UI before you integrate with Kik. Like you're going to have that in mind. I don't know. Actually, what do you guys think? I can run through the Kik specific APIs first, so that you have a better idea of how you're going to structure your product as you build it. Is that a better format? Nods, shakes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody has completely different way of building web apps.
Perhaps. All right. OK, I can run through the different APIs. I won't.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for
In
it.
your home.js,
Yep.
the function takes a page. Who calls that function?
Yes, so it's kind of called automatically. So whenever, actually, yeah, so let me show you my main file. So like I showed you, I have the home controller right here. But I also have a main.js. This is where my app logically starts. JavaScript has like probably a really painful part of it is the fact that it's like, so it's interpreted, which means that like any line of code anywhere can do anything almost in terms of code. So you don't really know where your app starts, right? It's not really like, it's not like in C or something where like, well, I have a main method, so I know for sure this is where things began. And if I wanted to trace through what's happening in my program, well, I could start here and sort of go there. In JavaScript, you sort of have to like take your HTML and be like, well, was there a script tag? Where's the first script tag? That's where things started happening. And so in this code, in the starter kit, what we try to do is sort of like, everything here is defining things, but nothing actually happens until we hit main. And in main, what happens is we're saying, well, I guess I can delete these for now. But in main, what we're saying is, to start my app, load the home page.
There's a function closure that calls app on itself.
Yeah, this is just a standard JavaScript idiom of, basically it's like passing in your dependencies, just in case they change in the future. I'm not doing anything asynchronous here, so it's kind of superfluous. But in general, what you normally do is sort of pass in your dependencies because, again, another problem with JavaScript is, by default, everything is global, right? So if I said, if I didn't have this and I said var x equals 5, well then, like, literally every other JavaScript file now has, when they run, has this like this variable called x that's 5, right? And it's kind of weird, and you get into weird situations where you wrote this code, it looks self-contained. It's not really, because somebody else wrote a different file that did stuff. And so all I'm doing here by having this this function that executes immediately is that, well, if I did x equals 5, well then this is the only place where x equals 5 because it's enclosed in this function. So I say pass in my dependencies, do everything I need to do inside here, and it doesn't matter what you did in that other file. It's not going to ruin my code. If that makes any sense. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, you're asking me like, who calls this function? Right here, we're just declaring. We're saying this function right here, this is the controller for the home page. That's all that means, right? So when you create the controller, like we call this function, well, all we do is sort of like go across the page and say, well, what do I need to set up, right? I have a search input. Well, I need to set up my search input. What happens when you search? We need to insert search results, right? Things like that. What you'll also notice is that before we load the home page, which is like our default starting point, we try to restore. And what that means is that because app.js knows about the structure of like your pages, the navigation flow, which is like, well, you had a page 1 and you had a page 2, right? You were on page 1, you hit a button, went to page 2. Maybe you left the app, you came back to the app. Normal web pages, you'll just sort of go to whatever the home page is. With normal native apps, or just any app, right, they might be running in the background, right? So you open it up and it's where you left off, which is sort of what you'd expect. And if you're doing something that is playing across multiple apps, right? So I'm in one app, I did something that maybe had a pop up to another app, right? Then I come back, right? If I'm doing anything with that kind of flow, I sort of, like, as a user, I sort of expect to be where I left off. And so what restore tries to do is says, you know what, like, last time you were running, I know which pages were loaded. And I know how they were loaded, what order they were in, all that kind of stuff. And if you want, you can call this restore function, which will try to load it in the way it was. Now, obviously, it can't always succeed, right? Let's say you had a code change in between, right? Let's say you just said, the home page doesn't exist anymore in the new version of my app, right? And so the app loads, it tries to load, it tries to restore, and it's like, I can't do it. So that's why we try catch it, right? We try to restore if we can. And if we can't, we just load the home page. And like a good example of something like this is, so if I'm in Reddit, so I'm looking at some content. For some reason, I go and I start talking to someone. So Reddit at this point is closed, right? This is like, if this is my browser, I've basically closed my browser tab, right? So Reddit's not running anymore. I go back by saying, oh, like open that last tab I was in, and it opens exactly the spot I was, right? Exactly where I left off. I hit the back button. I'm just going right from where I was, and that's what restore is. The goal of restore is to make it seamless in that sense. So the user might think it was running in the background. It totally wasn't, but that doesn't matter, right? Because our goal is to have a good user experience. So yeah, so this app.load is going to do is it's going to first take the home page. It's going to clone the node, right? It's going to say, I'm going to create an instance of this home page, right? And then it's going to say, let's create a controller for it, right? This page that we just cloned, we're going to pass it in here, and our JavaScript is going to set it up. It's going to say, find the search input, bind to it, let people search for stuff. And then it's going to transition in and show it to the user. So like I said before, I'm on this page. I say app.load home. Like there's already a home page running, right? So I say app.load home. What it's going to do is clone that, a second instance of the page. It's going to run the controller again, and it's going to like navigate it in, right? Yeah, so that's sort of the, like, when it goes right down to the basics, that's pretty much the whole point of app.js, is to make that flow as easy and structured as possible. OK, so I think before I progress too far, I'm just going to do a quick rundown of maybe Kik APIs.
Can you actually fix that thingy where the callback is now getting fired? Like when you do the page find search input on search, and that callback is now getting fired?
Yeah.
I'm trying to debug it. It doesn't fire for me either, so I'm just trying to understand why.
Yeah, I'm actually fairly confused as to why that would happen. Like normally you do something like keypress, right?
I tried to learn and didn't.
So if you notice, keypress is working, everything's great. I'm not exactly sure why the search event's not working, because you can definitely do on search, and it normally just works fine.
Is it because the emulator doesn't have that support?
No, I tried it on Firefox also, it's not working.
All right, if you really want to debug this, let's do it. Why not? Why not? Why not?
Oh, on search.
No.
Well, I was binding to it as a. I mean, there are also these attributes you can dump on there for. Where is it? No, I see. I did all of that. Incremental. Yeah, this is the one that we want. Yeah, this is like I was describing before. So on search is like when the user hits enter, do a search. Incremental is even better, where it's. I'll just show you how it works. Hopefully. So you just dump incremental, it goes incremental in your code. You go back in, and it's like, as you type, every time you pause, it'll just do a search. It'll be like, oh, search for that, search for that. I delete everything, it'll clear it up, right? So yeah, I guess that's the only thing I was missing. It looks like everything's fine now. Yeah, so if you're ever doing anything with search, like, definitely don't use key events, use search event. It'll make your life much, much easier. OK, I'll do a quick overview of the Kik APIs. I won't get too nitty-gritty into it, just to give you an idea of what the things you can do are. So yeah, here's. So yeah, if you just go to the list of links and you click on Kik API website, it'll open up this. I'll just dive right into the API reference. One of the biggest benefits of running a Kik, like I showed you before, was showing up in the search results and being listed in the top websites, right? Getting that initial user base from there and sort of taking off. But then once we get into the actual app itself, there are a bunch of APIs you can get out of this. Probably the most important of which are like messaging, obviously, but also regarding user identity, the social graph, push notifications. And then we have a bunch of APIs that are just sort of cleaning up what soon will be like standard web APIs. So things like orientation locking, right? So you can lock the orientation of your device. That's one of the things that we like. Web browsers should just have that built in. Like there will be a standard for this. We're sort of just waiting. But in the meanwhile, we have an API that does it. The second there's a standard, we'll just replace this with the standard. Yeah. So let me just start with like what are the keys. So obviously, yeah, we put in our Kik script. Great. So yes, I mean the basic things you can do are things like user identity. If we go back to our example here. Let me delete words with friends and go back in again. So I go to words with friends, right? Let's say I've never used this before, and I need to play with my friends. So it needs to know who my friends are, and it needs to know who I am, right? If it's a service and it's on its server, it's storing like game state, right? It's going to want to know who I am. It's going to want to know my profile picture, to show it to my friend, all that kind of stuff. And so there's a single API you can call to say like get the user's information. And when you call it, which they're going to do when we hit the button, the first time you do it, the app sees this page. Basically, it just says, you know, Words with Friends wants to know your profile picture, your name, and your username. I don't have a profile picture right now, but it would show up right there. And as a user, you basically say, yeah, I want to give it to Words with Friends, or no, I don't, right? And then once I do that, I can get right into the game. So it's got my profile picture and all that kind of stuff. And the benefit of doing this is very simple, right? Like you can persist information about a user on your service. And so I can have all of the games that are mine on the server. And every time I log in, like even if I blow up my device, get a new phone and log in, like it's like any identity service out there, right? But hopefully what we feel is like this is as seamless as it could possibly be, right? I don't leave the context of my app. I just have this single pop-up that says, do you want to give them your name or not? Like, and even that, you're just giving them your username so that they can key data on it. Yeah, so that API is very simple. You like literally kik.getUser. It doesn't get simpler than that. There are other things like if we get down into.
Does get user only give this anonymous user on the desktop, or can you actually use your own account?
No, yeah. So I mean, for you to have used your own account on the desktop.
Or to use like test accounts, like a test.
Yes. Yes. So there's a test account, but it will not actually send messages. So the thing on the desktop is a simulator, and we simulate all the Kik APIs. We don't actually allow you to perform them. Because once it'll become obvious why once we get into this. For example, something like authentication. So I just showed you how to get the user, right? That's great on the device. So now I'm on my phone and I know who the user is. I can show their profile picture, show their name. But once I send that information to my server, right? Now we have a fundamental trust issue, which is can the server actually trust the client that the information it's sending it is true, right? So that the client's saying, hey, I'm user XYZ, get me the data stored for user XYZ, right? Like especially if you have like user-centric data stored. Well, the server's going to be like, well, like how do I know you're actually who you say you are, right? And that's like generally a hard problem to solve. We've sort of done that using this authentication mechanism we have, which we use public-private key cryptography to. Like basically you say, like this is the data I'm trying to send to my server, create a signature for it, send it to the server, and then the server can just verify that, yeah, this came from this user at this website, right? This also prevents like, cross-origin issues that are like, well, the user was at that other website, and that other website's trying to steal your information from, the first website you were on. And that's why it's keyed on the user and the website. And like what I'm getting at with this Chrome extension is, well, the whole point of authentication is so that you can't lie about who you are, right, to the service. Well, if we allowed you to run your debugging stuff in the browser, well then like what you're asking for is like, well, I need to lie about who I am so that I can debug my code, right? And so what we've done is implemented all these APIs, but we've simulated most of them, and while they sort of work, they won't let you actually perform the real thing.
Actually server-based APIs, like getting friends lists and stuff like that?
No, everything's on device. Everything is like, so the user opts into just about everything, and everything's on device at the time that they do it. So for example, you can get, like I was showing you before, you can get the user's information. It's like first name, last name, username, profile picture. If they change their last name for some reason, like you're going to have to ask them again to find that out. There's no way to, like we're very privacy-centric basically, and there's no way to have a service continually have access to the user's information beyond the scope that the user allows. And that's also why we implemented authentication this way, rather than something like server-side OAuth. Because server-side OAuth is like, the app's server and Kik's server are sort of like talking to each other and saying, hey, here's the user's information, right? And from our perspective, like the right way to do it is that the user and your app server should be talking and saying, like the user should be giving you whatever information they want to give you. It should not be Kik, handing out the user's information. So all of our APIs are structured that way. Yeah, so again, we have authentication mechanisms. So once you know who the user is, you have a way of logging them in, which is exactly what you see in this game. So again, we logged in, it asked me who I was, and sort of like once we got in, it would have sent a request to its server saying, here's this, the signed content from the client, trust me, I'm this guy. And the server's like, oh yeah, you are that guy. Additionally, we have sort of social stuff, which is like you'll see it in here. So I say I want to create a game with my friend. So it says, oh, well, pick your friend, right? Again, we don't provide access to the entire friend list, as in like there's no programmatic access to like who are all of this user's friends, right? That would just sort of create the ability for an app to like spam your friends and things like that, which we're sort of trying to shy away from. But what we do is like, well, you can ask the person, well, I want to play a game with this person. So like, okay, well, let's start a game. Right, so I picked the wrong person. So yeah, I want to pick a game with myself. So it just calls this API that says, pick users, and it gives the user the opportunity to pick what they want to do. And they pick their friends and put it in. Beyond that, there is also, sorry?
It's still doing the full authentication. Like, how are you doing it now? It's like, do you maintain the credentials somehow?
Sorry, what do you mean?
The security that you're talking about.
Yeah. So there's not like, okay. So like if I just get right into it, like the user's device has a private key associated with it. So like this is generated by the user sitting on their phone. So nobody has access to that other than the user. Like not even Kik has access to that. And what the user does is generates a certificate, right, for their key pair. And they give it to Kik and say, hey, Kik, this is my certificate. If any app, comes around asking for my certificate, give this to them. And they sign stuff with their private key. And on the server, right, on my server, my app's server, I got some stuff from the user. I'm like, well, he says he's this user. Is he really this user? So I go to the certificate, and I say, I verify the signature with the certificate. It's exactly how like TLS works when you go to an HTTPS website or something like that. The only difference is like the certificate authority is somebody else, right? So if I go to HTTPS, google.com, right? My browser says, well, is it really Google? Like, can I really trust him? And Google's like, we're negotiating this part, and then I say, oh, well, like, I'll go to VeriSign or whoever the certificate authority is, and I say, well, can I actually see the certificate for this guy? I need to make sure that he's the right guy. And so fundamentally, we're using the same kind of technology to do it there. From a development standpoint, you don't really have to worry about nitty-gritty implementation, mostly because, again, on the client, all you have to do is call this one API. Hey, sign this data for me, please. And on the server, we actually have a, again, on the server, it's as simple as this. Like, we have a curl command that just sort of shows all you have to do is this one command to sort of like both verify that the content originated from this user at that website, and actually get the like unpacked data. We have a library to make that really convenient in Node. So if I just open up the Node library, so yeah, you sign some stuff on your thing. You call it kik.sign on the client. You gave the data to the server. And on the server, all you have to do is say, OK, well, kik.verify that this data came from this user at this website. And it'll come back and say, yeah, here's the data, and it was, it's the right stuff. And so those two functions are really all you need to get like a fully secure connection with your server in terms of passing around user data. All right. Yeah. So obviously messaging's a big API. Like you saw. So again, I'll stick with words with friends. So I showed you how I authenticated and showed up in here, but this is actually really convenient. That the word I'm going to use is send. But I played my turn, and now words with friends is like, well, send the turn that you've accomplished to your friend, right? And it's calling what is our kik.send API. They're using the variant of which like I'm sending it to a particular friend. You can also just call it in general. So if I was in Reddit and I said, I want to share this piece of content, what you get is the same sort of pop-up that comes up. And what I can do is pick the friend, right? I just say, well, I want to send it to this friend. Reddit doesn't know which friend I wanted to send it to. In the case of Words with Friends, they do know, right? They're like, well, you're playing against this guy. You have to send it to that guy. And in fact, they even put in this thing. You can't even forward it. Like if you notice some of the other messages, like this cat, have the forward thing where I can forward the message over to a different friend. Well, Words with Friends is like, no, this is a game between the two of you. This turn is between the two of you. So you're not allowed to forward it. So our messaging API is pretty, I guess, robust. You can set titles, text. In general, most people just sort of set a photo and make it like large. It tends to be appealing. And most importantly, you can pass in arbitrary JSON data in as well, so that when the message is opened on the other side, so if this is a turn that I'm sending to my friend, well, when he opens the turn on his phone, like we don't just expect it to just open Words with Friends. We want it to open to Words with Friends to this particular game so that he can play his turn, right? And so what they've done then is packed the data about which game this is and which user it was from, right? All into that message, so that when they open it on the other side, they can do something about it. And so yeah, like we have kik.send right here. Well, there's also kik.message, which is like, was this opened up from a message? What's the message, right? And the message is going to be whatever that JSON data was, right? So if you send a message, I can open it up on the other side and I can do stuff. If it was Reddit, like we will put the entire Reddit post that you're trying to send in there. You can fit, I forget what it is. It's like, yeah, so it's 7.5 kilobytes. That's, for most of this stuff, that's fairly generous. You can't dump like huge data URLs. Like if you're trying to make a image app or something where you can draw photos and then send them to your friends, like put the URL in there, don't put the actual data in there, it's not going to work. Because again, these are messages being sent. We want them to be sent fast too.
So on the receiving end, there's like a mailbox that keeps track of all these?
What do you mean?
Because he says there's kik.message.
Yep. Oh, no. So that just means like, did the user open your app from a message? So for example, I just sent the. Yeah. So for example, this is now the messenger, right? I'm going to go to the conversation I'm having with this guy, and I'm like, well, I want to look at this cat, right? And so in the data field that I was showing, the information about this cat is filled in, right? It's like, what's the URL of the cat? That's basically the only information in like the search term as well. So that when the app opens, image search goes, is there a message? If there is, let's go render that key, like that image, which turns out to be a cat. Yep. And the way we do this is sort of that. In this case, yeah, I opened my own message. I mean, I could have sent it from my phone.